What is up, guys? It is Saturday night as we're recording this video, and yeah, you might be thinking, Jeff, go to a movie, go hang out with friends. Nah, week 5 of the NFL season is tomorrow, and we are focusing on this DFS slate to try to win money, both in cash games and in tournaments. We're going to go over the top 3 games that I want to focus on in terms of tomorrow's scoring, trying to get ourselves these stacks that can win the GPPs, and then we'll talk a little bit about some of the cash plays and some of the guys I'm considering there. Make sure you subscribe, comment, and like, do all the things. Make sure you know that I know that you like this content, and let's get into it now. Let's go. All right, so as we always start when looking at games, which we're gonna stack, we wanna look at the over-unders and see which games are gonna have the most potential for touchdowns and scoring and fantasy points. So the highest total on this slate is actually this Eagles-Cardinals game, which is one that's gonna be very popular for Jalen Hurts and the Eagles going 4-0 against a bad Cardinals defense. This one's gonna be pretty highly owned, and we kinda wanna be part of it as well. The other game that's going to go very highly owned is this Falcons-Bucks game, another really important game for you to think about as you're building your lineups and making sure that these underpriced Bucks and limited Falcons receiving core are part of at least something that you're doing on the site this week. And then the third game I kind of want to talk about is this Dolphins-Jets game. I brought it up in the first look, and I still really like this game, just in terms of the potential for scoring and the lower ownership you're going to see on it. Let's go break down all 3 of these games from a DFS perspective. Cool, so let's start with this Philly-Arizona game. You can obviously, for every game, build 2 stacks. One for the home team, one for the away team, one for the favored team, one for the underdog. We're going to start with a Jalen Hurts stack. I believe this is going to be a very popular option for people in this game. As we take a look at the receiving options, we see A.J. Brown is the clear alpha. He's getting between 8 and 13 targets, which is very good. He is slightly higher in price, so we'll need to find something else in a different game for savings if we go with him. DeVonta Smith is another guy, a little bit lower floor, but as high of a ceiling as we saw in week 3 against Washington, 12 targets for 169 with that beastly touchdown. And then you can kind of punt with either of these receivers with Quez Watkins, hoping his speed gets him a deep touchdown, or Pascal just gets involved somewhere. And then, of course, Dallas Goedert is in the fold as well. If we want to be contrarian in this game, we stack the Cardinals, who are the underdogs, probably not going to win against this Eagles team, but if they do, it's going to come on the back of this offense, and that means Kyler Murray probably had a really big day. If we take a look at the wide receivers, Marquise Brown is obviously Kyler Murray's favorite, that Oklahoma connection. He is getting an insane number of targets, way more than A.J. Brown is getting. So he is absolutely viable in stacks. Looks like Greg Dortch is still going to be involved despite some additional receiver help from A.J. Green coming back. He is viable as well. A.J. Green himself making his season debut, I believe. Nope, never mind. He has played and just really hasn't done all that much. But he will be active as well, so he's viable in these stacks. And then, of course, Zach Ertz, who is playing in a revenge game against Philly, so we don't want to discount him at all. A couple other guys you can look at here. Rondale Moore, always questionable, but looks like he's going to play. And then I would not go down anywhere here. Andy Isabella is no longer on the team, so we don't play him. Bastelia, I forget his name, he's going to be active, but I'm just not playing him. So this is your potential stacks. Pick 2 if you're pairing with Kyler. So if we're talking about a game stack, I would probably go this direction, with Kyler Murray being a contrarian quarterback with just as much upside as anyone on the slate, and he's much cheaper than Jalen Hurts, which will give you some savings. It's $700 there, so it should help you a little bit. And then we actually use those savings to pay up for receivers. We're playing Marquise Brown and Rondale Moore, the 2 guys I believe are going to be the most involved in this offense, and then playing the alpha from Philly in A.J. Brown. The second game we're focusing on here is Atlanta at Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay is a clear favorite in this game. They are -10. So if you're playing this game, it means that Brady is getting up big. He's probably doing it through the air, and he's just going to make it happen through multiple receivers. So Brady is like the clear choice. He is a cash game viable quarterback this week, given that he's only $6K and put up something absurd like 29 points last week against the Chiefs in that losing effort. He did pass more than his average, 52 attempts versus around mid-30s. So something to watch out for. He probably won't pass 52 times. But if he does pass a lot, it's going to go to very few players. It's going to go to Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. Both are healthy, active, and playing. All 3 are viable for cash. Probably don't play them all in the same lineup. You could also try, depending on news tomorrow, one of these lower guys, but I would probably lean on those two as receiving options. We don't really talk about running backs in stacks, but Leonard Fournette and Rachaad White are both interesting options here. Leonard Fournette, another cash viable player, can sometimes be stacked with Brady, given that he, gets between, 2 is the lower end, 4 to 7 targets per week. That is absolutely viable with a quarterback. And if he wanders into the end zone, you're in great shape playing a contrarian running back with their quarterback. And then same thing with Rachaad White. If you go to him and you need those savings, I probably wouldn't, but is somewhat viable in Brady stacks. I would just be careful if doing that. Last player to talk about is Cade Otton. He projects to be the starter of the Bucs tight end group. He got 4 targets in relief of Cameron Brate, who was hurt with a concussion. So he is viable as well in these stacks. Take a look. We have 3 guys we can use. Pick 2 of them. Now, on the other side of that game, we have Atlanta and Marcus Mariota, who has $5,400 price tag on him, which is not very, restrictive. You can play a lot of things if you go down to Marcus Mariota versus a Jalen Hurts or a Kyler. And he has the potential to 3x at that price. 5,500 times 3 is 17 points. He's done that twice this year and just barely missed against the Rams. So he's absolutely viable at quarterback, especially if you're stacking this game. No Kyle Pitts this week, which is an absence of between 3 and 8 targets, which is 10 to 20%, depending on how many throws Mariota had those weeks, of the targets on that team. So they're up for grabs. You could go to some of these more receiving options with a little bit more certainty, given the fact that Kyle Pitts and Cordero Patterson are out. He's not all that targeted in the receiving game, but there's definitely room for change in this Atlanta offense. So you think Drake London is in for a massive game, given that he's had a number of targets and is still under that $6K price tag. You can also play Kadero Hodge, Zacchaeus. Probably wouldn't play any of these guys down here, but if you know Atlanta better than I do, maybe they're viable. If we're stacking this game, I'm probably going Brady, Evans, Godwin, and Drake London. Those guys project for a ton of targets. They give you salary relief for a game stack. And with 5K remaining per player without even picking your defense yet, you're in decently good shape to find some other really good options in this lineup. And the third game we want to focus on is Miami versus the Jets. Let's take a look at Miami first because it's way more fun. Tua is out. We've known this all week. Teddy Bridgewater should get the start, and he was very serviceable in replacement of Tua, threw for that 60%, had a touchdown and a pick. Definitely viable at quarterback. I would easily do these 3 guys as stacking options. Tyreek and Waddle are obviously going to be the 2 favorites. They're a little restrictive in terms of price, but we can find ways around that. Sherfield, if Cedric Wilson misses or is just not ready to go tomorrow, is definitely viable in this group. You can throw Gesicki in there if you want. He's not all that involved in the offense. And then one of Chase Edmonds and Mostert is also viable, but I wouldn't go there with a stack, just given their limited involvement in the receiving game and the fact that they take snaps from each other. So it's harder to predict the passing volume. I'd stick to these guys if you're stacking Teddy. And if you want to go Cougar hunting, we're going to stack Zach Wilson here. He is an option. Didn't play amazing in his last game, but did put up 20 points on 36 pass attempts. Everything we need from our quarterback, and he's 5,300, so definitely viable. If we're stacking a running back with Zach Wilson, we can think about BREECE Hall. Again, this is a suboptimal play, but even with Zach Wilson's return, BREECE Hall still got 6 targets in the receiving game, and people are thinking about BREECE Hall for cash because he's so involved in the receiving game. If he wanders into the end zone like Lenny does, viable. I don't necessarily think I'm going to land there. Where I do think I'm going to land is on these top 4 receivers. Top 5 receivers if we count tight ends. For Zach Wilson, Braxton Berrios, you may not like it, but he is involved in this team and is very viable in terms of a tournament stack. Garrett Wilson, obviously a monster in terms of targets for a rookie, getting a lot of work there. Corey Davis emerged last week with a touchdown. He has 2 on the season, is getting some targets, so he's a little bit less viable, but of course, playable. Elijah Moore, another guy, it's a 3-headed monster here, so you kind of got to pick 2 of those receivers, and 4 if you count Berrios, and then you can also play the Gronklin, Tyler Conklin, just in terms of salary relief. I don't think there's anyone better right now at tight end at that 37 price point. So if I'm going to stack this game, I'm going to keep with my Teddy 2 gloves stack of Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Of course, monitor their health before the start of the game. If one of them is out, either Cedric Wilson or Trent Sherfield becomes an immediate value on the slate overall. And then going back, not with Breece Hall, with Tyler Conklin, just to get some salary relief, and we'll find some options elsewhere in other games. Now that we've gone through those 3 games, let's talk about cash. Let's talk about points per dollar and guys that can, 1, be viable cash plays, get us into that top 50% of our cash games, or top 1 of 2 in our head-to-heads. And then also guys we can find potential salary relief with if we're stacking other games. Of course, if we're doing a quarterback in a tournament, we're probably stacking them with receivers, but let's talk about them isolated here. I believe there are 3 options for cash at quarterback this week. Number 1 is Josh Allen. Obviously, he is a fantasy unicorn, averages almost 30 points a game with a slight bad game in Baltimore, but we might give him an off because of the weather. Threw a pick, lost a fumble, but was still very viable. Definitely a cash game option at quarterback, given that he's also going to be one of the most higher owned players on the slate. Given high ownership, we're also going to go to Jalen Hurts in cash. Another bad game, was caught in the same weather that Josh Allen was. Philly and Baltimore aren't that far apart. Jalen Hurts, incredibly viable at his current price point. And then the other guy in terms of ownership is Tom Brady. We talked about him in our stack segment. Again, just has the potential to go off, and at that 6K price point, it's just too low. He's probably going to come in at like 15 to 40% in cash. So definitely a guy you want to consider, if not lock in at your cash spot. I think I'm going to go with Josh Allen for now. Next up, we go to running backs. And the one thing I would say about running back this week is that Leonard Fournette is one of the locks. He is projected to come in so highly owned, given his involvement, given his usage, and his low price, all things considered. He's coming in very high. And so when we talked about Brady earlier, if you're putting Brady and Fournette in your lineups, and then if you're putting one of the underpriced Bucs receivers as well, you're giving yourself a lot of exposure to that Tampa Bay offense, and you're potentially limiting your cash upside if that game doesn't shoot out. You know, say like Atlanta comes out and like kind of plays well and Brady isn't able to do everything he wants to. That could be kind of disastrous for your cash lineups. So make sure if you're playing Brady, Fournette, Evans, Godwin, you max out at like 2 of them. Otherwise, you're putting yourself in a dangerous spot from cash. If you're playing tournaments, go all in. Play 4 of them. Who cares? The next guy we're going to talk about for cash is Breece Hall. We've brought him up already in this video, so not going to take too much time. Given his receiving volume, the fact that he got 17 carries last week and has increased his carries every single week in this offense, clearly is overtaking Michael Carter for that lead role. We're going to put him in for now. Miami is not great against the run or passing against running backs, so we should be in good shape to play both of those guys there. And then our third cash running back who's going to go into our flex spot is Jeff Wilson. Again, underpriced for his volume. When we recorded our cash game video on Sunday night, they had yet to play, and he did score a touchdown. We predicted that on that show. He should get a similar amount of work. Granted, not as much receiving coming from him as we see from Lenny or from Breece Hall. But at 5,500, given his involvement, given his usage, and in a game against Carolina, they should win pretty handily. I anticipate Jeff Wilson getting a lot of work, 18 to 20 touches, hopefully 1 to 2 receptions, and if he gets into the end zone, he's a smash. There are a ton of wide receivers this week, and I think that while I'm probably not going to play one of these top 3, 4, 5 guys, they're all kind of viable in cash, just because they have such high upside. Talking about Cooper Kupp, he's like a walking 30 points in fantasy, 1 game under 20, and 2 games under 30, one of those being 29. Just put him in. It doesn't matter how much you pay for him. You're getting Cooper Kupp. That's always a differentiator, no matter his price or his salary. Justin Jefferson against the banged up Chicago defense went off last week. Has had a couple duds, but has as much upside as anyone on the slate. Consider him for sure. Diggs, Gabe Davis doesn't look like he's healthy at all, so he might not even get targeted. And then with Jamison Crowder breaking his leg, I believe, that's just another body down in that receiving core. No Dawson Knox this week, so Diggs should get absolutely fed, viable as well. Tyreek Hill, probably the biggest question mark given his health and the fact he's playing with Teddy Bridgewater. Don't need to get to him. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown is back. Sounds like he's ready to go against the Patriots. This game environment's a little tricky, but again, Amon-Ra can do it all. So those are the top guys that you want to at least think about for cash. Let's talk about the ones I'm actually playing. Now, earlier this week, I said that Mike Evans was actually one of the most underpriced players on the slate, but that was assuming Chris Godwin wasn't healthy. It sounds like Chris Godwin will be ready to go and like active and fully healthy for this game. After getting 10 targets in week 4, we saw that Chris Godwin is already part of this offense again, and 5,900 is too cheap for that. So I have my $2. I chose Fournette and I chose Godwin. I think they're both viable, and if you play Evans over Godwin, it's fine. I don't think that's a problem. If you play Evans and Godwin, I'd probably be a little careful. And then if you play Brady, just make sure you only got one of them. Next guy up in cash is going to be Chris Olave. We were so excited to get him in the first look video. Again, with the targets, like so much potential here. I know he is receiving from Andy Dalton, which is kind of a downgrade considering Jameis slings it. But he still did fine last week, putting up 16 points. That is 3x his salary. I am more than happy to play Chris Olave in this spot. And then we're going to play a guy right next to him in Tyler Lockett. Again, just like these targets are absurd given the $5,600 price. Catching 5 to 6 balls for 70 yards and hopefully a score is more than enough for him to pay off his salary and like play in our cash lineup. The lock of the week is at tight end. It's Tyler Higbee. There's no one at his price and no one else on this slate with his upside or consistency. Taking a look at these targets, 14, 11, 9. We're very happy with that involvement, especially at 4K. And even his 4 target game for 60 yards put up 10 points, which is more than 2xing. So like we are very comfortable with him there. And that leaves us just a defense, and the number 1 projected defense in terms of potential, not in terms of ownership, is the Cowboys. We're going to lock them in here. The other defense you want to consider, if your team allows that, maybe go down to Brady from Josh Allen, is the 49ers against Carolina. They're projected to be a very highly owned defense. And if they score a touchdown, you could be sunk by going with Cowboys. But I'm just going to bet on Micah Parsons getting a sack here. So that's our cash lineup for now. Obviously subject to change tomorrow morning. Feel free to drop a comment, a question, a like, a subscribe, if possible, please. And we will see you guys on the first look video for week 6. Good luck this week, and I'll see you in the next one.